is that when he's like doing that?
Thank you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord, amen. May the souls of the faithful departed rest in peace, amen.
As we know, my dad loved to laugh. We had many great memories here at Western, and Andy just reminded me of one of my dad's favorite jokes. This man went to his priest. He said, "Father, I'm really in trouble. My wife wants a divorce. I really screwed up this morning. I said something. It came out the wrong way. She took it the wrong way, and I really think she's serious this time. She's going to divorce me." And the priest says, "Well, what did you say?" And he said, "Well, I meant to say, honey, would you please pass the butter? But that's not the way it came out. That's not the way she took it." And so he said, "Well, how did it come out?" And he said, "Well, something like, you ruined my life, you bitch." If you knew my dad, you knew he loved to laugh. And to the very end, he never lost a sense of humor. For the last 2 months, he really stopped eating, and he was just getting skinnier and skinnier. And just about 4 or 5 days ago, I'm like, "Dad, you gotta eat. You're getting so skinny. Look how..." My sisters. "Look how skinny you're getting." And I said, "You're getting skinnier than me." And he looks at me, he puts up his fist, he goes, "You want to go 10? And my mom said every morning when she'd wake him up, he always had something funny to say. And he just always had a great disposition about it. Like when we ever came here to dinner, we've all had the days where you go out with your family and something's bothering you, you're in a bad mood, or you're upset about something. My dad was never like that. He was always the life of the party. Whenever we came here, he'd always give the waitresses a hard time, and the waitress, we would have a section, she knew that my dad was really going to give her the business, And so they'd come walking up, just grinning from ear to ear, because they knew my dad would lay into them. Like, "Oh my God, we got stuck with you again? I thought they fired you. I can't believe you're still here." I'm entertaining some of my favorite friends, and we get stuck with you all the ages we could have. And just sitting here today, I have recollections of some of the times where we sat when my dad, cracked up or did something funny. I remember we were sitting here one day when Tom Brennan, who's over here, Judge Tom Brennan, had this joke. And my dad, I knew, loved this joke. And so Tom Brennan starts telling this joke, which I want to tell, but it's kind of an off-color one. So I got to clean it up a little bit. But before he got halfway through the joke, my dad was laughing so he was crying. I never heard the joke. So I knew it was going to be funny. In fact, I got to have you tell the joke because you're so good at it. Another time, we were back in that corner way over there, and we were talking about Uncle Paul's girlfriend. My Aunt Kay had passed away. Now, Uncle Paul was the past president of the club here, and lifelong member. And my Aunt Kay passed away, and he started dating this woman, Dorothy. Now, of course, nobody could ever fill my Aunt Kay's shoes. And so it was hard to warm up to Dorothy. And so we're talking about Dorothy, and she kind of got on everybody's nerves. And then somebody said to my dad, "You know what Bob Kramer said about Dorothy?" And my dad goes, "No, what's that?" And I think it was Maureen said, "Well, Bob Kramer said, she died before Aunt Kay." My dad laughed so hard. He could not stop laughing. And the whole place was packed, and we're looking at my dad because he was laughing so hard. And we're like, "Dad, we told you that one before." He goes, No, I never would have forgot that one. And that was like probably 12 years ago, and I remember thinking, that is a bad sign because he did know that story and he forgot it, So that was the first inkling that my dad might start losing his memory. But my dad was, as Andy mentioned last night, famous for his handshakes and greeting the kids. And if you knew my dad, you knew that's what he loved to do. And you know, when I was a kid growing up, I'd go over and visit somebody's house. You know, it's like the dad was always the unapproachable one. It's like, don't bother my dad, he's watching TV, so you quietly walk past and maybe say hi. But now when any kid come over to my house, they couldn't wait to come over and see my dad because they knew they'd start getting the fist pumping, and I'm sure most of you have seen it, but if you haven't, he would grab the kid's hand, just keep pumping the hand, go, Sam, so good to see you, Sam. Of course, the kid was never named Sam, he was like Michael or something. And he'd say, no, my name's Michael. And, oh, no, it's not, it's Sam. And he just keeps saying, and then after a while, the kids would get used to it, and they couldn't wait to come out to my dad and get their hand shook. And then if my dad called him George or Sam, some of the kids would wise up and they'd say, if my dad called him George, they go, no, I'm Sam. Oh, that's right, Sam. And, you know, he pumps that arm for like 2 minutes, and my cousin Patrick, I don't know if he's there. Is Patrick here?
Yes.
Where's Patrick? Okay.
McGillicuddy.
Patrick, once you...
John, remember it was McGillicuddy.
McGillicuddy, you'll have to tell the story. Okay. So, one time Patrick said, yes, whenever your dad would greet me, he'd always call me Peter and pump his fist. And he said he was so adamant that my name was Peter that Patrick told me one time he actually thought maybe he was mistaken. Maybe it really wasn't Patrick, but my dad was so adamant he was Peter. Yeah, my dad loved a great story. I remember one time I got him laughing. I think we were sitting over here. I told him the story where we were talking about World War II. My dad was in the war, towards the end of the war, and played a lot of basketball, so he didn't see active duty. But he loved this one story about, it was on Iwo Jima or the Philippines, where the Japanese soldiers, they would jump in the foxholes of the American soldiers and blow a grenade up to try to kill the soldiers. I think they call it bonsai charge or something, you know, kind of like a kamikaze type thing. Well, they kill themselves and try to kill American soldiers. So there was this story where these men were in a foxhole, and the Japs are coming after them and blow themselves up. Lots of times they blow themselves up before they got into the foxhole. So a boot or a leg would fly into the foxhole. So the story goes, these 3 or 4 guys are in a foxhole, and they're afraid they're going to die, and they're scared to death. And this one Japanese soldier ran out, blew himself up. But he blew himself too early, so only his torso landed in the foxhole. His naked torso, his bare ass landed in this guy's lap. So this guy's carrying this bare ass, and he says to his friends, he says, oh my God, am I hit this bad? that was over here, I just remember that one. I think I wrote that. I love that. Oh, my dad had a couple stories, and there was 2 stories he would tell. He could never ever get through them because he'd start laughing so hard. But we all knew the end, so it's okay. It was just funny to watch him try to tell the story. The one he loved, I think, the most was when him and his brother Bill had an aunt visiting from Canada, and they snuck a whoopee cushion underneath her chair. So every time she would shift her weight, this whoopee cushion would go out, and they were hiding around the corners, laughing their heads off. And she would say, "What is around here? Is there a cat around here?" My dad would try to tell us, and he'd just be crying and laughing so hard. And then his mother would say, "You know, Mildred, don't you feel well?" There's got to be a cat around here. Another favorite story of his, too. In fact, I thought I might see some of the family today. Chuck McDonald, where he practiced law with. We grew up playing Farmington Country Club, and there was 2 par 4s that ran parallel to one another, right towards the clubhouse. And if you remember the old Farmington Country Club, the 9th and the 18th green were right in front of the country club. And one was a short par 4, one was a long par 4. So the first one they played was a long par 4, and Chuck McDonald creamed to drive, and then he had a 3-wood left. So he hit a 3-wood and hit it near the green. And so then when they came and played the last hole, which parallels the 9th hole, he only had about an iron to the green, but he couldn't tell because the sun was right in their eyes. And so he said to my dad, "What do I got left?" And my dad goes, 3-wood. You know, he must have been hitting a 9-iron. And so, shot me down, hits this 3-wood, and just, in the sun, he just hits this screaming ball. And my dad telling that story was so funny for him, because he hit it right over the clubhouse. And the parking lot. I should probably have more golf stories. We were telling one in the car today. Danny mentioned at the eulogy, I forgot about that. That was true. I would get a good golf ball, like a Titleist, a really good shiny golf ball. I'd be playing with that one, and my dad was always, fishing for golf balls. And so he's always had these stained, water-stained old, golf balls that only went half the distance. So if I hadn't had a good ball, he would, what are you doing playing with this ball? Man, I got a better ball for you, and you're giving this crappy ball. I just had to suck it up and take it. All the golf stories. That's when I first remember my dad. We grew up playing Farm to Country Club, and he owned his own golf cart. So the thrill for me was to go out there, and I got to drive the cart. And Andy would tag along, and we'd play golf. But if you ever played golf with my dad, it wasn't really a sport for my dad. It was more of an addiction, kind of like I got it too. But my dad was funny. He could never play one ball. He always had to hit many golf balls, and he could never play in order. So if you played the old Farm to Country Club, every hole went east and west. Only two went north and south. And that was the way our cart would go up and down the golf course. We would zigzag trying to find an open hole. And so you get to play one hole. And I always wanted to keep score and get a handicap. Not my dad. He'd want to hit 10 golf balls, and then go to the next hole where it was open so he could hit 10 more golf balls. And that's the way I learned how to play golf. And you never get by, like you're a little kid, all you want is a pop and some candy at the snack bar, and that snack bar was like heaven to you as a kid, But again, I would never see it because we were always out in the middle of the course. Like 5 hours going zigzag. And they had apple trees and pear trees, and that's how we had to get nourishment. It was like, pick a wormy apple. Yeah, that's true. I miss my dad's retirement party because Kathy and I were stuck in a snowstorm down in Florida. So I remember writing it all out, and I had all these great golf stories. And back then, fax machines had just come in. So this was 1992 or 3. And I faxed them to Andy, and Andy tried reading my chicken scratching, but he gave up on it after a short time. I got several people coming up, I hope, to tell a few stories of my dad. I know I got Tom Brennan can tell his joke. If you don't remember, I'm going to tell you what joke it was. And Danny O'Brien promised to come up. Bob Kramer, you better get up here. And why don't we start with Judge Ryan? Thank you.
That was a great snapshot of your dad. It couldn't be improved upon, I don't think. The reason he didn't stop by the snack bar to buy a Coke candy bar because that costs money.
Got that right.
John set the tone just right for Dad. Levity, he was a great guy. He loved to laugh, just as John said. But if I could change the mood for just a minute, not to ruin it at all, I'd like to say a word about another aspect of our pal that I admired so much. Yesterday, I'm sure many of you know, the psalm at Mass was, "Blessed and poor in spirit, the kingdom of heaven is theirs." Yesterday is not the day Jack died, but it would have fit perfectly if it had been Wednesday. Because taking the word poor in spirit and the term in its classical sense, that was John Dillon from beginning to end. He had a sense of humility, a sense of love of his father and his wife and his family that was hard to replicate in anybody. Humility was the essence of Jack Dillon, despite his wonderful humor. And I tried to stay close to him for the last 60 years because humility is not a virtue with which I am particularly familiar. I thought it'd be good if I could stand in his shadow. the news called the other day and wanted some information for an obituary, and I gave the man my assessment of Jack, and the writer didn't use a single thing I said about Jack. It's as though somebody else had written the obituary, and the guy captured Jack just right in a lighthearted sense. But what I said to him is what I'd like to say to you for a minute now is, if there's a word that captures Jack, and from my perspective, I'm sorry. Thanks, Marie. It was the word fidelity. Jack loved his Catholic faith, and he lived it and practiced it, but he didn't wear it on his sleeve. He practiced it deeply, devoutly, consistently, and meaningfully, but quietly. And his fidelity to Jan and to his family was the first order of his life on this earth after the practice of his faith. And then he loved, of course, his Irish heritage, and was faithful to that in the sense that he adverted to it many, many times, participated as best he could in the Irish activities, not so much simply to have fun, although he did, but to make a contribution, I thought, he thought, to preserving the Irish heritage here in our community. And then, of course, he loved the game of golf. I wouldn't say he had any fidelity toward the game of golf, because good as he was, Jack was not familiar with the rules of golf. They had an irrelevance that got in the way of his enjoyment. They would play golf, and somebody, Chip Cannon or Chuck Darnell or somebody would say, "Well, we're not rolling him over today, are we?" And we'd all say, "All right, not today." Jack rolled him over, and there were only two. Jack was a guy who loved. He loved not in the Pollyanna sense at all, but he loved deeply and meaningfully. He didn't hate anybody. There were only two things he hated. One was missing short putts. The other was picking up the tab. And he never did much of either. Danny captured him beautifully at the Mass about his golf game, and so is John. Jack's idea of a successful day at the golf course was to find somebody who was not under 97 years old and couldn't see, and Jack could play him even for 18 holes. But I will count myself always blessed that we were close friends. All of you were close friends or relatives. I take no primacy in that respect, but visited Jack a few times in his last illness, including on Monday, when a number of you were there, I know. And we got a chance to smile, exchange a crack, hold hands for a minute, say a prayer, and I got a chance to say goodbye. And I got to thinking, and I mentioned this to Andy today, I got to thinking that as Jack's reality narrowed in this life with the progression of his disease, and as his consciousness of what is going on around him in the world became less and less and less, until last week, I think his awareness of what was going on in this life was very, very minimal. And I think that was an ideal way for Jack to make the transition to a gloriously, indescribable, glorious eternity that I think he richly deserves, and I think is enjoying. God bless you.
He was a showman of the first rank, and then Judge Ryan. I get up after this. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. No, Judge Dillon, a long time. I've done all the Dillons a long time. Really, my first waking memories. I've known the Dillons. I was thinking today, I knew Mr. Dillon when he was still a Democrat. That's a long time ago. But I remember growing up across the street, and I remember, the press talking about Camelot, where the Kennedys were in the White House, and I was Camelot. Heck, we got Camelot right here on Olympia. It was a beautiful place and a beautiful time. 60s to grow up across the street from the Dillons. And we had a great time. We had a lot of fun. Great neighbors there too. And I remember, there's so many things I could talk about, but just a few memories I'm going to talk about. And Judge Dillon, Judge Dillon and my father taught me how to play golf. And Judge Dillon and my dad had this Hogan's 5 fundamentals of golf. And they would sit on the porch, Dillon's porch or my porch, and my dad and Mr. Dillon would sit side by side, from this book, and I'd just be swinging the golf. And I'm just swinging and swinging and swinging. The whole time, they're sitting there taking turns going in the house, getting beer. Whoever wasn't holding the book and telling me what to do was going in the house getting me beer. Going to get the beer. So what I learned early on is that most fun part of golf is the beer. And people who play with me today will say, learn my lesson well. When I play golf, there's always plenty of beer. Another part of this whole, like I said, Camelot experience was just all the fun my parents and Mr. and Mrs. Dillon had. And I know our family gets stuck with this calling him Mr. Dillon. Everybody thinks of him as Judge Dillon, and I didn't call him Judge Dillon, but we knew him as Mr. But he would come over the house of Mrs. Dillon, they'd bring me the musical whiskey. And there were some pictures last night that I saw, and then I swear they were singing the songs that I was thinking of. Judge Dillon playing his harmonica and Mrs. Dillon on the guitar. And I had thought of this, and when I saw it, I said, sure enough, she's singing Fish Gotta Swim, Birds Gotta Fly. And it's funny, we all love that song, and thank Mrs. Dillon to sing that song. I was never quite sure if she loved it as much as we did. But she sang it well every time. And another song, Mr. Dillon would play his harmonica, and he just played on and on and on. And my mom would sing, my mom would do the words to every song. They always counted on her for that. But when he got done playing songs and nobody could think of another song, I would always ask him my favorite song was A Closer Walk With Thee. And he played that so beautifully. It was amazing. Oh, he did it so well. But there was one funny time when he was playing the harmonica. We were on vacation. We went on a lot of vacations together with the Michelle's. And my brother Jimmy and Bob Michelle had gotten in a lot of trouble with him. And the two of them were banished to their cottages. And they were there for the night. And Judge Dillon, sure enough, always being a practical joker, gets out of his harmonica, goes and stands in between the two cottages where they're stuck alone in their rooms and starts playing, If I Had the Wings of an Angel Over These Prison Walls, I Would Fly. It's just the funniest thing. Cracking. Anyway, my father and Judge Dillon were very close friends. And my father, people who know my father know, we had a lot to say among lawyers and judges. It was kind of funny thing to realize that one of my dad's dearest friends in life, for my whole life, was not only a lawyer, but he was also a judge. Eventually, after many years of screwing around and a lot of other things after high school, I became a lawyer myself. And recently I had the good fortune of winning a judgeship in Oakland County. And then one of the reasons I bring up this story is I was proud to share that with Judge Dillon. But when I saw Judge Dillon, one of his typical things, he always did when I did something worthwhile. And I saw this in some pictures last night. He would grab me around the neck, shake me like only Judge Dillon could, and say, "Not bad for a punk kid with no talent." So, he said that to me so many times. He was not far from the truth when he said that. That's for sure. There's so much about Judge Dillon to talk about. I love his smile. And I have this picture in my office now. Mrs. Dillon and Mary Beth came up to my office, brought Judge Dillon with him, and he put on his robe and he sat with me in my courtroom, and I had this just beautiful picture. And he has this great smile, and I saw that picture on one of the boards as well. And I remember that smile. And I remember the voice, that big, loud voice, and the laugh. And one last story I want to tell you, and I think the Catholic Central boys in here will appreciate it. One of my other brothers and I went to UB High School, and after I was done with high school, the youngest, I got involved with the UB High Golf Fund, the alumni golf fund. And one time, my older brother and I my oldest brother, decided we're going to ask Judge Dillon to play with us. And sure enough, Judge Dillon, being such a great guy, agrees. He's going to come play with the O'Brien boys. And we show up during the morning. And I got to admit, I was so proud walking out there with Judge Dillon. I mean, you know, Dana talked about it today. Great reputation, great man. To be walking out there with Judge Dillon, and also a great golfer to boot. You know, he was our ringer. We go out on a putting green, and it's just filled with booty high grass. And you know, Judge Dillon, somehow things worked out for him. Timing was everything. The green calmed down for a second. And Judge Dillon looks around and he says, wow, I didn't know there were so many guys who couldn't get into Catholic Central. So hard, and I haven't stopped laughing about that since. I loved it when he did it. Broke out after that. I don't even know what my fellow UBI did. I really care. I love Judge Dillon. And I love all the Dillons. Mrs. Dillon, I love you. Take care.
So he's trying to figure a way to clean it up. And then there's Bob Kramer here.
No.
He just left. He left. Oh, one of my dad's favorite stories is Bob Kramer's famous eulogy at my Uncle Paul's funeral. I can't believe that. So, you know, now at the Masses, maybe one eulogy at the end of Mass, but there's a time period there where anybody can just get up. So unannounced at my Uncle Paul's funeral at the same church, Bob Kramer gets up and tells this story. He had a bike shop, and a fire came through and wiped out his store. So, of course, he said, I was the #1 suspect, because the insurance didn't want to pay. So Bob hired my Uncle Paul, who was kind of retired at the time and not practicing much, and Bob's wondering if I should really use my Uncle Paul as my attorney, because his life savings is in the store and he's wiped out. So it comes, it's getting closer and closer to the court date with the insurance company trying to deny the claim, and my Uncle Paul and Bob fighting it. So Bob keeps on thinking my Uncle Paul's going to bring me in and prep me and prepare me for the trial, so we'll knock him dead, you know. But he never calls, and Bob's getting more and more worried. So it finally comes to the day of the trial. So Bob decides he should wear a suit and tie, and he's got brand new pairs of shoes. So he comes in my uncle's law office, and my Uncle Paul, first thing he zeroes in on was Bob's shiny new shoes. And he keeps complimenting Bob on those shoes. He says, Bob, those are some really shiny shoes. How did you get those shoes so shiny? And Bob's like, whatever, come on, you know, let's get going, let's prepare, you know. So Uncle Paul grabs them, brings them into his secretary, goes, whatever secretary name was, he says to her, he says, look at my nephew's shoes, aren't those the shiniest shoes you've ever seen? And she goes, yes, they're very shiny. So then my Uncle drags him down the house, all these law offices in there. He's going from office to office, you know, showing off his nephew's shiny shoes. Bob's just getting more and more nervous. So they get to the court, and they're waiting for the judge to come out, and they're at the bar, sitting at the table, and the attorneys for the insurance company say to my cousin Bob, he said, Mr. Kramer? And he said, yeah. And they said, would you like to wake up your attorney? Would you like us to? And he looks over at Uncle Paul, and there he is sleeping. So, Uncle Paul introduces, you know, the two attorneys to Bob, and he's telling look at my client's shiny shoes. I don't know what shiny shoes you've ever seen. So Bob's getting more and more nervous. He's telling this eulogy at church. It's so funny. You totally unexpected. I wanted to repeat so I could tell it today. So they break, and they're coming back in, and Bob, my Uncle Paul tells Bob, don't worry, I got your money. And Bob's like, you got me the money? No way, how? And he goes, oh, I know that attorney's dad. He told him he wouldn't give him his golf shots, his handicap shots on the course if he didn't give him the money. So I got your money. Jim Dillon?
I don't have any good stories, but I can maybe put a point on it.
Okay. And then we'll follow up with Judge Brennan. What do you have for? Tell it.
Good afternoon. I I don't have stories that compare with the stories that we've given already, but could reflect on some of the things that have already been said and maybe put a fine point on the message about Uncle Jack. And obviously goes back to my youth and how he would treat children. And many have said that he would greet them. I don't really view it as a greeting. It was more of a celebration because it didn't matter if he was talking to another adult. And so many of the things that came to my mind about how in our generation growing up, you wouldn't walk in front of the TV like if the evening news was on, or interrupt adults because we were kids. But with Uncle Jack, it didn't matter. He stopped what he was doing, he would turn to you, and with every muscle in his face and every fiber in his body, he was celebrating your presence. He would take hold of your hand, and it wasn't a firm handshake. It was a quasi-aerobic activity. And he wouldn't let go. And I don't know how I forgot, probably 20 years ago, I was into the dock with problems because I couldn't shake people's hands. Only now I think maybe there was a connection. But, and I don't know how many in here were known as Chico, but that was my name. I know there were some Esmeraldas and some thought that was very special to them, but I was Chico. And I don't know, are there any Chicos in the room? Okay. Anyway, I felt pretty special. I didn't even realize how many people had that experience. So it's kind of dramatic because you felt special as a kid. When he would turn and look at you, and not everyone smiles with their whole face, with their whole being, but he would. He gave you his attention from his eyes to his mouth and everything. And I was fortunate enough to see Uncle Jack on Monday and shake his hand. It wasn't quite as firm. Didn't have to worry. But he still smiled with his whole face. And he was so happy to be surrounded by family. And I really think that part of the measure of him, he was just a genuine, caring person, had a great life, and many of us were blessed to have known.
It reminds me of an occasion at Ted Sullivan's funeral parlor. A certain member of the bar, whose name I shall not mention, was being buried, and Knights of Columbus came out for the rosary. I think John Curley was probably the president at the time. And after the rosary, he said, "Was anyone here like to say a few words on behalf of the deceased?" And nobody, except them. Nobody had anything to say. I said, "Well, there must be someone here that have a kind word to say to the deceased." "How about you, Jack Dillon?" And Dillon said, "Well, there's one thing I could say, but his brother was worse." John Dillon reminded me of a joke apparently I told here one night. I don't know that. Remember that I knew all these things. But it was not really so much a joke, it was a story. It's a story. Just a story that could happen. Of a gentleman who came into a saloon, a bar, actually, sort of a nightclub type situation. But he went to the bar and he ordered 3 drinks. And he knocked down these 3 drinks very rapidly in the bar, and he ordered 3 more. The bartender said, you're drinking kind of heavy here, aren't you? He said, when I get through drinking here, I'm going to go out and walk down the street up to the bridge, and I'm going to jump into the lake and the river, and I'm going to end it all. The bartender said, "That's a terrible thing." He said, "Wouldn't do that." And he said, "Life is worth living." And I said, "No, not for me, not for me." He says, "Well, tell me, what's your story?" He says, "I'm a songwriter. And I've written dozens and dozens of songs, and I've never been able to sell one. I've been to every publisher in this town, and nobody will listen to me, nobody will pay any attention to this work. She said, you know, this is a big restaurant that we have some top people come in here for dinner and so forth, and in the business, show business and entertainment world. He said, why don't you go over to the piano and play one of your songs? And maybe, you know, tonight will be the night. You'll discover it. So he said, well, give me another drink. So he gave him another drink and knocked it down and went over to the piano. And he began to play the piano. Just a soft note here and there, a little harmony, and a little bit of a rhythm would start to come. And it was soft, it was kind of quiet, but it was haunting. And suddenly in this great big room, a silence began to fall on the room. And the whole place was quiet. And even the waiters and waitresses that walking around with carrying things, they stopped in their tracks and they listened to this music. And gradually, the music began to swell and the tempo got a little faster and more exciting and more thrilling. And it kept going and going. And finally, it came down to a soft, gentle, haunting finish. Dead silence fell over the entire room. And all of a sudden, everyone was on their feet, applauding, cheering. It was the most exciting thing they'd ever heard. And he walked back from the piano to the bar, and the bartender's tears running down his face. He said, I can't believe that's the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard in my life. He said, you can't sell that? He says, no, I've been to every publisher, and nobody wants it. He says, tell me, what is the name of that song? He says, that song is called I Love You So Much I Could Shit. Jack Dillon, I'm sure, if he saw it, would have certainly loved the story of Waking Ned Devine. And Waking Ned Devine is a great movie, one of my very, very favorites, about this little Irish town where old Ned Devine was a bachelor, won the Irish sweepstakes. And he had no relatives, no living relative of any kind. But he was so excited when he saw that he'd won the Irish. He died. He died of a sudden heart attack. So his neighbors in this little town decided that they didn't want the Irish sweepstake people to know that he died because he had no relatives, and everything would have escheated to the state. So they wanted to make sure that the money was collected in their little town. They'd all divide it up. So they figured out a way to have Michael O'Sullivan sort of pretend he was Ned Devine and sign the papers and get the money from the man from the Irish sweepstakes. So of course they went ahead and had to have a funeral for old Ned, and all the folks in the town were at the funeral, and Michael O'Sullivan was sitting in the front row. And who comes into the back of the church but the man from the Irish sweepstakes? And of course, they didn't want to mention anything, but Ned Devine's being very good. So Jackie, I forget his last name, but Jackie was the principal character in the movie. He was up speaking. And of course, then he realized that the man from the lottery was there and didn't want to mention Ned Devine. So he looked down, and there's his friend O'Sullivan. He says, well, Michael O'Sullivan was my great friend. I don't think I ever told him that. He says, Michael and I grew old together. There were times we laughed. We grew young again. He said, the words that are spoken at a funeral are spoken too late for the man that's dead. What a wonderful thing it would be to visit your own funeral. You sit in the front row and hear what is said, and maybe say a few words yourself. If he was here now, if he could hear what I say, I'd tell him, you're a great man, and I'd thank him for being a friend. And that's what I'd like to say to Jack Dillon tonight.
What Judge forgot on his joke was the end of that. The bartender kept that guy's number name and number, and a month later, the New Year's Eve party, there was a cancellation. The band was sick. The whole band was sick. And so the only guy they could get was this guy. So they call him up and they say, could you possibly play New Year's Eve? I know it's short notice, but the whole band's got the flu, we need you. And the guy says, well, what do we have to wear? And the guy says, well, preferably a tuxedo. So he tells the bartender, well, I have one. I think I could get it on. I'll show up at stuff. So the guy gets out his old tuxedo and he squeezes into it. And he shows up on time. He starts playing all these great songs. And every now and then he'd throw in one of his own numbers, including the one that we won't name. And every one time he'd throw it in, all the titles were similar. So they're all very off color. But he had the audience warmed up and they would just die laughing. And it came time for his first intermission. So at the intermission, he pays one of his greats, and he's getting a standing ovation, and it's his first time on stage. And he's so happy, he starts, bowing to the crowd, and his tuxedo rips open, and he's not wearing any shorts, because they've got to get this tux in. And so he's exposed, right? And the bartender's aghast, he says, oh my God, do you know your balls are hanging out? Do you know your balls hanging out? And the guy goes, no, I wrote it! Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks everybody for coming. And some of you weren't here last night, so for those of you who were here last night, bear with me as I repeat this. This was a sad week. We lost Jack Dillon. But we also lost Joe Dunn. And Joe Dunn's wife called in the obituary. And she was real long-winded, and she kept going on and on and on and on. And so then the man said, that'll be $375. And so she said, glory be to God, we couldn't pay all that. She said, just forget all that. And just say, Joe Dunn died. So, madam, we do have a 6-word minimum. So she said, well, all right, say Joe Dunn died, Toyota for sale. Now we have an esteemed Irish performer here, and this is an Irish wake, an Irish joke, and we have Patty Allen.
I hope I remember the words.
Just a closer walk with thee. Are you going to sing with me, Jan?
Patrick.
Just a closer walk with thee. Precious Jesus, hear my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. Just a closer walk with thee, precious Lord. Dear Jesus, let it be. I'm about 30 years older than when I first sang it.